12 years ago, Stephen and Gillian Bullock decided to make an award where they were inviting scholars who completed their study 10 years ago to show what they had achieved in terms of innovation, business development and leadership. I will say more about this evening, but just suffice to say that we're going to hear from the 2017 winner, Andy Gage, and the judges were hugely impressed by Andy's unbridled enthusiasm, his can-do attitude inspired by his Nuffield experience, and his sheer grit and determination to build successful businesses on his farm. So I invite Andy to come and give us a synopsis of what he'd done in that 10-year period. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. David Hitchens said earlier, we all start this knowing very little. I think I can prove that I start businesses knowing less than anyone else. But it's never held me back. Right, I'll talk quickly because it's lunchtime and I'm on a diet and I'm hungry. Okay, Rudyard Kipling said in his poem, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose, and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. I'll stop there, because if I didn't breathe a word, I wouldn't have a talk now. Right. I didn't grow up in farming. My dad was a banker. We lived in commuter towns around London. My grandfather, though, had a farm, and I used to love going and helping him feed the pigs. This is me, the little chap on the right. I always used to have a favourite pig, which annoyed my granddad. And we had 1,200 pigs and 300 acres of arable. I took over the farm for my grandfather at 19, my father having died young. It was difficult. The farm was losing £50,000 a year. I had no money. I didn't inherit the farm directly. I had to make businesses on the farm that made money. I couldn't be long-term. I needed money. So I started off by cutting loss-making enterprises. So we got rid of the pigs, laid off the staff. I then went to the bank and borrowed £250,000 and built a duck shed. And we grow 10,000 ducks at a time for Gresham Farms. I converted all the pig sheds. We made the doors and everything by hand ourselves on the farm, me and one chap. We developed a 50-box livery yard. And we developed a fencing system with another firm, and we did a lot of fencing contracting around the area. I then, because the farm was inherited through my mother and my aunt, I was having to pay them. And I was also I inherited the debt, so I was having to pay the overdraft. I wasn't earning enough money. So I set up a fish farm. Brilliant idea. And it was fantastic. The second year of producing, we produced 80 tonnes with a £4 a tonne margin. And it was going brilliantly. And then overnight, we were shut down due to fraud further up the supply chain. And it turns out our fish had been hormone treated. And we just got shut down, literally overnight. And I lost everything. And I was quite despondent with agriculture and things like that. And I went home and I said to my wife, what's the least farming thing you can think of? And she said, double glazing. So I went out and set up a double glazing business. And I had 2 secretaries, I can't remember how many vans running, but I couldn't employ people fast enough. We were 3 weeks behind on quoting for jobs, and it was roaring. One day I made 15 grand, just pure profit on sales in one day. And it was fantastic. And then Northern Rock hit. And we had about 50% of our jobs cancelled, with 50% deposits paid. And it was a disaster. I laid off all my staff. Well, I sold the business to the manager I had running it and laid off all my staff just before Christmas because we just had no orders coming in, no jobs. So that was a pretty hard time. So what did I do then? I bought another franchise. And I bought a business that serviced Burger King kitchens and commercial kitchens around the country. And this is an interesting one. It's easy when a business fails to say, right, I'm going to stop it. But this business didn't fail. This just middled. You know, it made money, but not a lot of money. Did it make enough to carry on? Was it worth putting into? I don't know. It was a difficult one. And I have quite a short attention span, so after a year, I sold that one. And just going back to the farm, so this is the farm that my grandfather had, 300 acres. And I inherited, well, the way my granddad set it was that he put a third of the business aside. He said I should buy, he appreciated that I couldn't buy a whole farm on what farming was made, what farming made. So he said that I should pay a third of the value of the farm. And I should pay a third to my mother and my aunt. And then he gifted me a third and said, on condition that I pay the third to my aunt and my mother, I get the second third. So that's quite a good system that suited our family and gave me a chance of being able to farm. So the reason that I was having to do all these businesses was because I was having to pay my mother and my aunt. I was having to pay the bank. I was having to pay for the £250,000 I lost in fish. I was having to pay different things. So I decided to make a land sale just to clear the debt because I was just overworking myself trying to earn enough money to keep the thing going. So we sold 100 acres, and I don't regret it at all. I attended a worship company farmers course, and I learned on that course that actually as farmers in built-up areas, I'm in Essex, so I've got 100,000 people within, say, 25 minutes of where I farm. What we have that people want is space. And a lot of farms don't appreciate that just space is something that the general public doesn't have. Modern houses are built so small, they've got no storage. So I realised that I've got tons of grain stores and things like that that I could just convert into offices and workshops. So we made 14 workshops and offices. Our buildings aren't fancy, they're not posh, they're not great. We're not in a great location. Cheap and cheerful, easy rents. We charge £300 to £600 a month, depending on the size. Easy in, easy out, month, either way. We're full all the time. And I think out of my 14 units, over the last 8 years, I've only had 2 tenants change. So I'm quite happy with that. It's simple and easy. So these are just some of the units. We rent about 36 shipping containers as well, which is a nice little side business. But all these different projects weren't quite so linear as these slides suggest. They were on, various ones were running at once. And I was still paying the family, and I couldn't do it. I had a massive confidence loss, and I was offered a job. And I hated every minute of it. And I've decided that I'm completely unemployable. So it was at this point that I made the decision to sell the land. And I was having to earn about £200,000 a year to pay everyone in the bank. And I was literally earning nothing. And I'd got 4 small children at this point, married. And I quit the job after a year and went to the bank, borrowed some more money, and looked at the parts of the business that were good, the units, the storage, the ducts. So I expanded from 10,000 ducts to 30,000 ducts. So we produce about 250,000 birds a year. And my wife wasn't over keen and everything. I work a lot of hours and had to take it easier. So I sold everything off farm. Anything that wasn't based at home, I sold. And then I hit a point where I'd gone from working 15 hours a day, but I'd geared the farm so that it didn't need me to be there. So everything happened without me. Everything carried on. So then I was at home. I had nothing to do. I had like a couple of hours a day work. So I did quite a bit of fishing, which is something I like. Quite a bit of shooting, something I like. And then my wife said, I'm not so keen on you fishing and shooting all the time either. You need to find something to do. So we saw a fire pit in the States, and it was $17,000. I thought, that's fantastic. I love that. And how hard can it be to make one of them? I'm not paying $17,000. So I found a guy in China who'd sell me some balls. And I got an E in art at school, so I thought I'm fully qualified to go into an artistic project. I drew a fire pit, cut it out, And my wife's friend put it on Facebook, and we had a barbecue on a Saturday night. We've all got small children, so our parties finished very sedately at 9:30. And midnight, she phoned up and said, "Andrew, you need to look on my Facebook page. That picture of that fire pit has gone mad." Her husband, Jay, my best mate, had set me up a Facebook page called the Fire Pit Company, and had transferred, was pointing everyone who was emailing, where can I buy this fire pit, onto my Facebook page. And that had 100,000 hits, that picture, on the first night. And I had a guy knock on the door a couple of weeks later and say, "That fire pit on Facebook, I'll give you £1,000 for that." So I was like, "Yep, I'll take that." My wife came home, "Where's my fire pit?" So, funny story, but I can make you another one. So, golden rule, never turn down the money. And within 4 months of making that first fire pit, I got a phone call from the lovely ladies at Chelsea Flower Show. And they offered me a pitch as a guest artist. And I was like, wow, I was actually at a shoot when they phoned. And I went to speak to the gun next door, who's a landscape gardener. And we were waiting for the bird. It's one of those shoots where it takes ages for the pheasants to come. So I went and had a word with him, and I said, I just had a phone call from Chelsea Flower Show. They've offered me a pitch as a guest artist. I said, "What do you know about Chelsea?" And he said, "Well, it takes you about 10 years' wait to get in." I was like, "Well, it can't be that hard. They're cold calling people." So he said, "What did he say?" And I said, "Well, I'll have a think about it." He said, "Well, I'd go back right now and I would phone them and say, you do it." So I did, because, it's a challenge, isn't it? And then, did Chelsea Flower Show. I developed some more designs. So Tree of Life, English Country. We've got fire pits all over the world. There's Lothian Castle, big 6-foot one there. And then they said to me, "Why don't you enter our Product of the Year award?" I said, "What hope have I got of winning your Product of the Year award?" And she said, "We do the shortlist in the office here. And we're telling you it might be a good idea for you to enter." So I entered. First day of Chelsea Flower Show, 2014. We had, obviously, Product of the Year finalist. Front page header, Daily Telegraph, hottest things to see at Chelsea Flower Show, and a picture of me with one of my fireballs. So that's pretty good. And then the last 5 years, we've done Chelsea Flower Show, 5 gold stars the last 2 years, so quite happy with that. I was Product of the Year 2014 and 16. I should just point out why there's missing years. That's just because I didn't enter. So I like to think I would have won those as well. So we've sold to royalty around the world. We've sold to celebrities. Prince Philip has been onto my stand once, twice, and a third time. Still not brought. I'm beginning to wonder if he's a bit of a time waster. If I see him coming this year, I might just look a bit busy. But my favourite, of course, I got to film with Holly Willoughby, and she is lovely. And she loves the fire pits. Right, so the fire pits has been a roaring success. Last year we turned over £1 million, and with a quite healthy margin. And I bought back a little bit of land. Just to keep my granddad happy. And my main love in life is fishing. I love business, I love setting up business, and I'll be honest, I don't love running businesses. But I love the setting up. And my thing I've always wanted my entire life is a lake. So some people have midlife crises and buy Ferraris and young girlfriends. I build fishing lakes, and my wife, I think, prefers the fishing lakes. But there's been ups and downs. As well as financial ups and downs. I know what it's like to lay in bed at night and not be able to pay the wages the next day and have to go begging to family for money to keep my one member of staff paid. And I also know what it's like to make tens of thousands of pounds in a day when deals go well. So, life's been a real up and down. But there's been some personal issues as well. So just before conference last year, my wife was diagnosed with bowel cancer. And this is her on her first day of chemo. And there's not much of her to start with. And chemo was pretty hard on her. And then just to add to the fun, in March, while she was on chemo, March or April, I developed a mystery illness and ended up in a wheelchair, and I couldn't walk. And this is my wife pushing me, 6 stone she is, wet through, pushing me, pushing 17 stone, in a wheelchair, round hospital while she's on chemo with an IV. And I ended up in hospital on a critical ward for a while before they decided that I had sarcoids, and they thought I'd got cancer as well. But that was a really, really hard time. And I must say it was thanks to my Nuffield friends, especially Matt Swain and various people, that I kept through that sane. And though I must say that Matt brought the business group round to visit the farm while I was in hospital, and trying to do a question and answer session while you're on quite a lot of morphine. I'm not sure if the questions were answered very particularly well, but it was fun. I don't remember too much. I don't remember finishing sentences. But so what have I learned through my Nuffield over the years? I've learned don't do fish, however much you like fish. And actually, interestingly, I did the fish because I love fish and fishing, but I've done better on things that I'm actually indifferent to. Is something that you're passionate about, is that the right thing you should go into business with? I think there's actually something you can be more judgmental on something that you're not passionate about and you don't have a love for, but you can look at it as a pure business. So my original subject was diversification, failure to prepare is preparation for failure. I actually wanted to call it Surviving the Learning Curve of Farm Diversification. And I think this describes the last 10 years for me. It is about survival. I've learned 5 key things over the last 10 years. You must have a story. More clips. You must have a story. The media absolutely loves a story. The story doesn't have to be 100% accurate all the time. They'll never get it right. But you've got to give them the story. So the public loves a farmer. I'm a small family farmer, struggling to survive. I make fire pits. The fact is, we have commercial units, we have 250,000 ducks. We're not a struggling farm, but the story is still true. And it's that story that hooks in. That's what makes us different to other people out there. We're not just an engineer who makes fire pits. We're a farmer, and that gives a difference. Interestingly, talking about media, I got turned down after several rounds of The Apprentice auditions. Apparently, I'm not arrogant enough. I am working on it, though. And one thing I've learned is that with the media, so when the fish was going brilliantly, one day I had a double-page spread about me and the fish in The Guardian. How brilliant it was. How this was the future of sustainable fish farming. A week later, I was bankrupt. Well, virtually. I didn't actually go bankrupt, but it was shut down and gone. And that's, don't believe everything that you read about yourself in the paper. And more importantly, don't believe everything you say about yourself either. I've learned over the last years that you need people around you. You can't do everything yourself. So generally as Nuffields, we're great business starters. That's what we love doing. But how many of us are actually business manager? There's a difference to a startup, being creative, putting the hours in, developing, getting that through to actually running then a business. We have 9 staff, we have all kinds of boring things to do. So I've hired someone to do all those boring things, and it's the best thing I've ever done. But you've got to remember when making people decisions, you've got to remember people's motivations. What motivates people? It's not just staff, but what motivates customers, what motivates friends. Generally, in my experience, motivating factors, ego and status, is a much more motivating than finance. So you can use that with your staff. Boost of an ego gets you more positiveness than a pay rise. But also, like with customers, with our fire pits, buying our fire pits is aspirational. They're a status symbol. So you have to remember that with your marketing, that don't cheapen the product because we want people to want it. The main thing I've learned really is be friendly to everyone, but not everyone is your friend. That's customers and things especially. But when Vicky had her cancer and when I was ill, I just had to step away from the business. And having that manager there who could just do it, I didn't go in for, I'd like to say 4 weeks, but thinking back, it was just before Chelsea and I hadn't drawn all my fire pits. So I was in the I'd wheeled myself down in the wheelchair with my legs up, and I was drawing fire pits from my wheelchair, and my wife came and pushed me back and said she was going to wheel clamp me. So the third lesson is something I've had to learn, is to balance optimism with reality. You need optimism to be an entrepreneur, but you've got to be realistic as well. I love creating spreadsheets, so every time I do a new business, I will create the most amazing, complex spreadsheet that I can adjust every variable. But you've got to be realistic with your inputs into those spreadsheets. So with my double glazing business, it was a perfect spreadsheet. It's the closest I've got to perfection, color-coded lines, it was amazing. But when it went down, I loved the fact that actually I got great satisfaction that when I shut it down, it predicted to within like £250 how much I would lose. I got quite a lot of pleasure out of that. So you've got to get the small pleasures out of things, even if it costs you. And the other thing, pricing. I've got to thank Rob Ward at this point. Rob sat down with me and gave me a good talk on pricing products, and especially in our industry. So, well, in my industry with the fire pits, we're selling art, and people value art and what they pay for it. And so we don't sell a fire pit. If you come to me to buy a fire pit, I'll correct you and say, would you like, they say, can you buy a fire pit? I say, no, would you like to commission a fire pit? Getting the terms right through marketing is important. And I find a classic farmer mistake when they're pricing things is they say, well, this cost me £10 to make. I need to make 20% margin, so I'll sell it for £12. The price something costs you to make makes no difference to the sale price. That's irrelevant. The sale price is what the customer will pay for it. And interestingly, when I started making the fire pits, I did well, it cost me this much. I want to make this much of fire pit because it takes me, a week to make one. So I priced them at £800, and I sold fire pits. Rob Ward said to me, you're too cheap. Rob and the business group, you're too cheap. I doubled the price, and we sold 3 times more the week I doubled the price than we did the week before, and ongoing. So that's interesting, getting the price point right. Right, my last point, and then I'll close, is got to look after your well-being. We've heard a lot about that this morning. Realistically, how much money do you need to earn? That's a lesson I've learned the last year or so. I was always driven by creating businesses to make money. I needed to make money because I wouldn't have a farm, I wouldn't have a house. Once you've got past that point, how much do you actually need to earn? Is working every hour of the day worth having a heart attack? Is it worth missing your children growing up? And I've definitely done that as the children are young. So having that manager and saying, yeah, I'll pay someone 50 grand. I'm going to earn 50 grand less by not doing that job. But I've had weekends off. I've had holidays. Success and wealth come and go, but your family only grows up once. I should just mention something from my Nuffield study. This is one of my favourite stories. Pee and Poop, this is called. I was lost in Tasmania, and I drove into a farmyard, completely lost. I was about an hour late visiting the farm, and I saw this guy welding a cement mixer on a metal frame. And I was like, well, got to ask what you're doing. And he said, I make compost. So I said, oh, that's interesting. I'm Nuffield, I'm looking at farm diversification. Can you tell me about your compost? He said, yeah, I mix pea straw I grow on the farm with dried cattle manure I scrape off the yard. And he said, I sell it for $4 a bag, £3 a bag equivalent, in garden centres. I said, oh, how many of them are you doing? He said, I did 40,000 bags last year. This guy was in the middle of nowhere, absolutely nowhere. What had he got? He'd got a bit of straw, and he'd got some cattle manure off his yard. And he was making £120,000, that's £120,000 equivalent, bagging it up and selling it into garden centres. That's all it was. He was printing out the labels on a home printer. And it just goes to show that for us farmers, there is opportunity everywhere. People say to me, oh, I don't live in Essex with loads of people around me. I can't do what you do. But I'm like, this guy lived in nowhere and making a fortune. So that's a real inspiration. And for the new Nuffields, Nuffield's more than just a study. I've got so much out of the business group. Now, when I started, I had no one. My grandfather had died, my father had died. There was family issues why my uncles who farmed, they expected to get the farm and they didn't come to me, so there was issues with, I didn't get help from any family. I was literally on my own. I had no one to talk to before Nuffield, and that's why I made mistakes. I just did my own thing. And since coming to Nuffield, I've kind of feel like I've got a family with the business group. This was a few weeks ago. Matt and Holly Beckett took us on a tour up Cribgoch in Snowdonia, which is terrifying, but it was absolutely fantastic. And I'm a person who likes a challenge. So this year, I'm running the London Marathon. Now my legs are working again and I'm out of the wheelchair. I thought that's a good thing to do. And I have 2 children with cystic fibrosis, so I'm running in aid of cystic fibrosis. And I'd just like to thank Stephen and Jill Bullock for the award, and Alan and Anne, of course, for my original scholarship. Thank you very much.